Sup, y'all? Breezy here, and welcome back to People of History. Our last episode, we talked about Corrie ten Boom and how her family and her did his heroic actions during World War II. So, this week, we're going to be talking about another man who did the same thing. So, what led to this episode was I was watching Girl Meets World, and there was this episode that I remember. It was season 3, episode 13, called Girl Meets Great Lady of New York, and during a culture project where Farkle learns that his great grandfather was Jewish but adopted by a Christian family in Denmark during World War II, leading to the initial confusion about his identity and the holidays, but ultimately deepening his understanding for his heritage and the importance of finding himself. And I was watching The Sound of Music also for the 1500th ish time. Number's not important. And it got me thinking how many families were similar to the Von Trapps. And it then got me thinking about Operation Pedro Pan. And then it led me to remembering this Girl Meets World episode. Yes, my brain did go down a weird rabbit hole. And I decided to find some families and organizations that helped Jewish children flee from Europe during World War II. Upon those families was a man by the name of Sir Nicholas Winton, aka the Winton Train, who was a British stockbroker who saved 669 children who were mostly Jewish from Czechoslovakia by organizing trains to London just before the war and inspiring the film from One Life. He was born to German Jewish parents who had immigrated to Britain at the beginning of the 20th century, and Winton would assist in the rescue of 669 children from Czechoslovakia on the eve of World War II. And on a brief visit there, he would help compile a list of children in danger of returning to Britain, where he worked to fulfill legal requirements of bringing the children to Britain and finding home and sponsors for them. And this operation was later known as the Czech Kinder Transport, which was German for children's transport. And it is also important to note that his humanitarian accomplishments will remain unknown and unnoticed by the world for nearly 50 years until 1988. And he was invited, my bad, to the BBC show That Life, where he was reunited with dozens of children he had helped come to Britain, and was introduced to many of the children and grandchildren, and he was even dubbed the British Schindler. And in 2003, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II for his services to humanity in saving Jewish children from Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia. And in 2014, he was awarded the highest honor of the Czech Republic, an Order of the White Lion, first class by Czech President Miloš Zeman. Winton would die in 2015 at the age of 106. That's 106, y'all. Let's talk about his early life for a second. He was born May 19, 1909 in Hampstead, London, to Jewish parents Rudolph Wartham, a bank manager, and Barbara, who as the middle of three children, and his older sister was Charlotte, and his younger brother is Robert. His parents were German Jews who had moved to London 2 years earlier, and the family was named Wertheim, but they changed it to Winton in an effort of integration. They also converted to Christianity, and Winton was baptized, and his mom was the sister of psychiatrist Frederick Wertheim and Ida McAlpine. In 1923, Winton would enter the Stowe School, which had just opened and he left without qualifications, attending night school while volunteering the Midland Bank. Now, he then went to Hamburg, where he worked at Bergens Bank, followed by Wasserman Bank in Berlin. And in 1931, he moved to France and worked for the Banque Nationale de Credit in Paris, where he earned a banking qualification in France. Returning to London, he became a broker at the London Stock Exchange. And though as a stockbroker, he also was an ardent socialist who became close to the Labour Party luminary Aneurin Bevan and Jenny Lee and Tom Dryburgh. And through another socialist friend, Martin Blake, Winton became part of a left-wing circle that opposed the appeasement and concerned about the dangers posed by the Nazis. At school, he became a fast learner. At school he became an outstanding fencer, fencing both foil and épée, and was selected for the British team in 1938. And he hoped to compete in the 1940 Olympics, but the games were canceled because of World War II. Let's move on to his rescue work. Now, shortly before Christmas in 1938, he planned he was planning to travel back to Switzerland for a skiing holiday. Following a call from help from Maria Smolka and Doreen Warnier, he decided to instead to visit Prague to help Martin Blake, who was in Prague as an associate at the British Committee by the Refugees of Czechoslovakia, and then in the process of being occupied by Germany, and had called Winton himself to assist in the Jewish welfare work. Along with the Czechoslovak Refugee Committee, the British and the Canadian volunteers such as Winton, Trevor Chadwick, and Beatrice Wellington worked in organizing aid for children and families at the risk from the Nazis. Many of them set up their office in the dining room in the hotel of the Wenceslas Square. And although Winton spent 3 weeks in Prague and left in January 1939, 2 months later before the Germans' occupation of Czechoslovakia, other foreign volunteers remained, such as Chadwick, Warner, and Wellington. And in November 1938, following Kristallnacht in the Nazi-ruled Germany, in the House of Commons, approved a measure to allow entry into Britain for the younger refugees younger than 17. And they had a place to stay, and warranty of £50 was deposited per person in their eventual return to their own country. Let's talk about his work in the Netherlands now. And now, it's important to note that there was an obstacle that was getting official permission to cross the Netherlands as the children were to embark in a ferry at the hookup of Holland. Following Kristallnacht in November 1938, the Dutch government officially closed its borders to any Jewish refugees, and the Royal Netherlands Merchandies searched for them and returned any found to Germany, despite the horrors of Kristallnacht being well known. And Winton succeeded thanks to his guarantees that he had obtained from Britain following the first train full of refugees to the Netherlands, escorted by Quaker Tessa Roundtree, and the process went smoothly as they crossed over. Now, Winton ultimately found homes in Britain for 669 children, whose parents perished in Auschwitz concentration camps, and his mom worked with them in placing homes in later hostels. And throughout the summer of 1939, he placed photographs of the children and picture post-seeking families to accept them. By coincidence, the names of the London and Northeastern Railroad steamers, which operated to Harwich and in the Hook of Holland route, included the Prague and the Vienna, and the former can be seen in 1938 past Newell. He wrote to many U.S. politicians such as FDR, who was president at the time, and asking them to take children. He said 2,000 children. He said that 2,000 more might have been saved if they had helped, but only Sweden took any besides those sent to Britain, and the last group of children was scheduled to leave Prague on September 1st, 1939, and were unable to deport when Hitler's invasion on Poland was the same day. The Second War had begun, and out of the 250 children due to leave, only 2 would survive the war. And Winton acknowledged the vital roles of the Prague of Doreen Warner and Trevor Chadwick, Nicholas Stafford, Beatrice Wellington, Josephine Pike, and Bill Berizzetti, who were the people who organized the evacuation of the refugees including the children from Czechoslovakia, and Winton stayed in Prague only about 3 weeks and left before the Nazis occupied the concentration camps. He never set foot in Prague in main railway station, although a statue of him is erected there. He later wrote to Chadwick and then went to work and dealt with considerable problems at the Prague Inn. And the work he continued to carry on even when it became difficult and dangerous when the Germans arrived. And it says that he deserves all the praise. This man was a humble king. He hated, like, he didn't want the recognition. He really didn't. But here are some notable people that he saved. Alf Dubs, Heine Habelston, or Nana Salksford, E.C. Malstein, Greta Mayer, and Carol Reese. Now, out of the 669 children saved from the Holocaust through his efforts, more than 370 have never been traced. And everything. Now, let's talk about the Second World War. Following the outbreak of World War II, Winton declined to be conscripted into the British Army, applying successfully for the registration of conscientious objector, and later served with the Red Cross. In 1940, he rescinded his objections to join the Royal Air Force administrative and special branches. Initially, he was an aircraft man and rising to sergeant, and on June 22nd, 1944, he was commissioned as an acting pilot officer on probation, and on August 17, 1944, he was promoted to a pilot officer on probation, and he was also promoted to the rank of substantive flying officer February 17, 1945. Staying in the Air Force after the war, he relinquished his commission on May 19, 1954, retaining the honorary rank of flight lieutenant. So, let's talk about this war hero and humanitarian post-war. I'm tearing up here, guys. Um, but went, but his now following the war, he will work at the International Refugees Organization and then the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development of Paris, where he would meet Gret Jestrup, who was a Danish secretary and accountant's daughter. They would marry in her hometown, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, on October 31st, 1948. They would have 3 children, 2 sons, Nicholas Jr. and Robin, and a daughter, Barbara. And the younger Robin had Down syndrome. And the family insisted that Robin would stay with them rather than go to a residential home, as was the norm at the time. Robin would die from meningitis the day before his 6th birthday, which affected Winton greatly, and he founded a local support organization, which became a Maidenhead men camp. Winton unsuccessfully um for stood unsuccessfully for town council in 1954. He later found work in the finance department of various campaigns. Now let's talk about his recognitions. Now, I said earlier, he was a humble king. He did not like to be recognized. I gotta respect that, honestly. Now, when mentioned about his humanitarian accomplishments and his election material while unsuccessfully standing for election in 1954. Otherwise, he went unnoticed for half a century until 1988. His wife found a detailed scrapbook in the attic containing a list of children, including their parents' names and addresses of the families that took them in. He gave the scrapbook to Elizabeth Maxwell, a Holocaust researcher and wife of media magnate Robert Maxwell, and letters were sent to each of these known addresses. In the 80 of the Winton children were found in Britain. In an interview with BBC Weather, the Life Scientific, Simon Wesley described his father Rudy as one of the rescued children and had a chance to encounter Winton. Now, the wider the world found out, about his work February 1988 during an episode on the show That's Life when he was invited as a member of the audience. And at one point, his scrapbook was shown his achievements and was explained, and the host of the show, Esther Ranson, introduced Winton to the children that he helped rescue, including Vera Yassin. In a later follow-up of That's Life, a show Winston asked whether anybody in the audience was among the children who owed their lives, and if so, to Stan. Sorry, guys, this is emotional. Like, oh my gosh. More than 2 dozen people surrounded Winton and had applauded him. And then she would go on to ask if anybody was present at was the child or grandchild of one of the children, and the rest of the audience would stand. You know, that is amazing right there. Now, he was the subject of the This Is Your Life tour in 2003, and he was surprised by Michael Aspel at Winton House, and Abbey Winton House was named in his honor. Now, by the time Winton's work became known in 1988, most of the people who had worked in the kinder transport of Czechoslovakia had died unrecognized. Despite the widespread praise, 2 scholars had attempted to highlight his accomplishments were a group effort writing in the situation. We should not reduce the account to one saint. Now, Winton and his brother Robert started their interregional fencing competition in 1950. The Winton Cup continued and was celebrated on the latest 70th anniversary in 2022 due to the COVID pandemic. Now, this man will live to celebrate his 100th birthday. That is a victory in itself. Not many people live that long. And Winton would fly over to the White Waltham Airfield in a micro-light piloted by Judy Lennon, the daughter of one of the boys he saved. His birthday was also marked by a publication of the profiles of the Jewish Chronicle. In 2014, a book was entitled It's Not Impossible, The Life of Sir Nicholas Winton, which was wrote by his daughter, Barbara. Now let's talk about his death. As if this episode was getting emotional enough for me. I'm a girl, what can I say? But Winton died in his sleep from cardiac arrest on the morning of July 1st, 2015. And having been admitted a week earlier for deterioration of health. This man was 106, y'all. But yeah. He was cremated and his ashes were buried at Braywake Cemetery in Maidenhead, Berkshire. But yes. And let's talk about some of his honors real quickly. In 1983, birthday honors, he was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire. He was also awarded the Thomas Goring Massif for class by the Czech president Václav Havel in 1998. He was also a humanist and active member of the Humanists UK, who described religion as a facade advocating for human ethics based on goodness, kindness, love, and honesty. Now let's talk about the Winton train real quick, because I think that's important for us to really talk about. We can't talk about this man, the British Schindler, without talking about him. And on September 1st, 2009, a special Winton train was composed of 1 or 2 steam locomotives and carriages used in the 1930s, set off in Prague main railway station for London via the original Kinder transport route. And on board were surviving Winton children and their descendants, who were welcomed by Winton in London. Now, the occasion will mark the 70th anniversary, and the final intended Kinder transports arranged by Winton due to set off September 1st, 1939, but was prevented by the outbreak of the Second World War that very day. At the train's departure, memorial statues for Winton, designed by James Floyd, was unveiled at the station. But yes. But that is it for this episode. Thank y'all for tuning in. This is an important man of history. He was a humble man, and there were so many people who went into this work to make sure these children got to safety. But I will see y'all next time, and y'all just have a really good day. Remember, being kind is important.